Well, also covering this story is our foreign editor, Kethevane Gorjestani. She's with me in the studio now. Kethevane, just tell us a bit about why Russia is apparently once again focusing on Ukraine's energy infrastructure and why it's such a problem for Ukraine.
Well, because we're at the end of the summer, which means that soon enough it's going to start getting cold in Ukraine. And the United States had these two words. They called it the classic move from the Kremlin, which is, of course, targeting that energy infrastructure ahead of the winter to make things even harder for the Ukrainians. And the Russians are not hiding from it. They are saying, yes, we are targeting that energy infrastructure. That is what we're going after. And you saw the Americans reacting to that yesterday, putting out a statement saying that Washington was surging its energy equipment to Ukraine to repair what Russia has damaged and to strengthen the resilience of Ukraine's energy grid. But this is something that the Russians have been doing ever since the start of the war. And yes, it is, as we saw in that report, a really big problem for the Ukrainians because they have to play catch up. They have to go and figure out whether they can save part of these energy plants, repair it in time for the winter. But at the same time, you could also argue that even though Russia has been targeting that infrastructure for more than 2 years, so far, at least, the Ukrainians have managed to sort of keep the country at bay, if you will, whether it is because they're very good and fast at repairing because of the help of the allies and their resilience, whether it is because the Russians, even though they are targeting that infrastructure, they're not doing it efficiently enough. But at least for now, they've managed to, yes, have rolling blackouts, yes, have problems with water, gas, electricity, but overall, they have managed to keep the country going even deep into the winter, and that is what they are hoping is going to happen again this coming winter.
Well, let's talk a bit about President Zelensky, the Ukrainian leader, because he's been appealing to the West to greenlight the use of long-range weapons deeper inside Russian territory. Let's take a listen to the president.
Each of these strikes repeatedly brings us back to the task of long-range capabilities, the need to provide our defense forces with enough long-range weapons that can destroy terrorists exactly in the areas of their strikes. This is the optimal counter-terrorism tactic, one that every partner of ours has the right to and would undoubtedly use to protect themselves, and we expect decisions from them, decisions on our long-range capabilities.
So, Kethevane, Zelensky wants to be allowed to use Western weapons in Russia, deeper inside Russia. What's the Western response to that?
Well, there has been at least a response from the White House on record saying that Washington has no changes to its policy about how its weapons can be used in Ukraine. And the policy right now, when it comes to those missiles, is basically you can target within Russian territory, but keep it close to the border, basically in a sort of self-defense move of targeting areas or locations where the fire is coming from, but they have sort of put a red line to targeting deeper within Russian territory, which is what Zelensky is asking for. But you have to go back to the start of the war to sort of understand what is at play here, because this is not the first time that the U.S. or other allies, for that matter, have said, no, you cannot do this, and then few months later decided to go back on that and say, actually, here's the green light. They did that for just in general offensive weapons at the beginning of the war. They did that with tanks. They did that with the F-16s. And now they're also moving on the Russian territory part, because initially there was a sort of red line on even targeting just on the other side of the border, and now you're seeing that move. So the question is this one of those red lines that is going to be moved back again in a couple of weeks, a couple of months, because there is pressure? Zelensky, of course, is pushing for it, but also allies are not necessarily agreeing amongst each other because, for example, the British and the French seem to be a little bit more open to the idea of going a little bit deeper within Russia to target military infrastructure. The Americans and the Germans seem to be really reluctant to do that. And over these past 2 years, the basic response and the reasoning for why to put all those red lines in the first place was, we do not want to escalate this war. We do not want to give Russia a reason to possibly retaliate against allies, which so far the Russians haven't actually done every time those lines have been crossed, which is the argument of the Ukrainians. But in the meantime, while the allies decide whether or not to do that, the Ukrainians are moving along because they just announced that they had tested successfully a first ballistic missile, a homemade ballistic missile, and that just after last week announcing a missile drone that was a long-range missile drone. So the idea is possibly to start building it at home so that they don't need the green light of the allies.
Fascinating. Thanks very much, Kethevane Gorjestani, for us there.